Hello and welcome to this course about ISO 27001, which talks about information security management systems. I am Luke Desira and I'm very happy to have you on this journey with us whilst we are implementing and managing your ISO 27001 certification. And in this video, I'm going to explain the overall concept of what ISO 27001 is all about, and I'm going to explain how the implementation process goes and what you need to do to get and maintain your ISO 27001 certification. So first things first, ISO 27001 is an information security management system. And the idea behind any ISO standard focusing on management systems is that of continual improvement. Okay, so when thinking about ISO 27001, we shouldn't think about having perfection in terms of information security, but rather we should think in terms of having a system for continual improvement that talks about both the internal and external hazards that might impact information security. So we're not only talking about cybersecurity, but we're talking about information security in general. Therefore, we're even talking about things like, for example, a clean desk policy. We're talking about the cabling within your offices, if you have offices. So ISO 27001 as an information security is an overarching management system that is geared for continual improvement, focusing on topics relating to information security. And of course, an important element of any management system is that when it comes to the improvement of the management system, we're achieving this improvement through data. Okay, we're not using opinions, we're not using random information, but rather we're using structured information data that we are analyzing to turn into knowledgeable information that we can use to take decisions. And ISO 27001 can be implemented in any organization. I have clients from software development to security service companies to fintech companies and also possibly some manufacturing companies where, for example, one of my clients was manufacturing products of a certain brand that were going to be used for a certain event where secrecy was extremely important. So ISO 27001 can be applied to any company in any standard, as in any industry of any size, and therefore the standard cannot tell you what you have to do. Okay, it won't tell you exactly the procedure that you need to follow for a specific concept. It will rather give you the concept, and it will be up to us during this implementation process, whereby we will take those requirements and adapt them as best as we can to your management system. And the risk management, the risk-based approach dictates that if something is risky for your particular business, then we need to consider it. If something, even if it's a requirement, doesn't pose such a big risk on your organization, then limited effort can be placed on that particular risk, because there is, again, this idea of the risk-based approach into management systems. So as you can see, this standard of ISO 27001 is adapted at helping you to know which topics you have to control when considering at your information security management system. And let's talk a little bit about the history of ISO standards. So first of all, unfortunately, like most things in the world, ISO standards started through a war. So in World War I, the Allies had a problem where they were dropping bombs on enemy territory, but they were not exploding, which was bad, but not as bad as the problem they had in World War II, whereby bombs were exploding inside the factories of subcontractors, which, needless to say, was devastating. And what happened was that the army basically asked their subcontractors to document their management system, to explain what processes, what systems were they using to manufacture their products. And as I'm sure that would happen if I were to ask anyone to create the systems for their company, everyone had their own idea of which topics they had to include, the layout they had to put in that information, and other elements relating to the documentation of a company. And this created a problem because then the allies had to decipher the logic that everyone used to implement, to document their management systems. And that is how the first version of a quality management system was born, whereby a set of guidelines was given on how to document their management system. Of course, after a number of years, the war ended, and on the 23rd of February in 1947, in the UK, in London, ISO was launched, which stands for International Organization for Standardization. And ISO handles thousands of standards, okay, like the plugs, the tests that have to be done on hollow concrete blocks, what a laboratory testing hollow concrete blocks should have, how to test steel, different types of steel. So there's thousands of standards relating to products, but then there are a few, around 20 management systems that can be applied by organizations like yourself. And the current version of ISO 27001 is the 2022 version, okay? The previous version before that was the 2013 version, and the first version of ISO 27001 was launched in the year 2000. The version of the latest version, the version of 2022, is excellent because it has refined the types of controls that are available in Annex A. And I will explain what Annex A is later on. For now, you just have to think that whenever there is an update in the standard, it is updated in such a way that it is made more relevant to the needs, to the current needs of the organization. For example, in 2013, the use of cloud software, even though it was being used by some companies, I would say, nowadays it is being used by most companies and to cover a lot of topics. So now there's a control in Annex A controls relating to cloud software. So the idea is that every time there is an update, the standard gets more relevant to the needs of industry. And basically, in 2000, it was very basic, as I have mentioned, and it has improved over time to help companies to maintain their management system in a more relevant way to current needs. And there is this idea of having a risk-based approach whereby, and especially in information security, we're going to have a lot of risks coming from different sources, and we have to use a structured way in which we can prioritize these risks to see which risks are most potentially problematic to our organization, so that we can take the necessary actions to mitigate those risks. And that is the idea that we're trying to implement and to achieve when implementing an ISO 27001 certification. And now let me talk just a little bit about what you need to do to get and to maintain your ISO certification. So first of all, I'm going to explain about the 10 steps that you have to go through when implementing an information security management system. I'm going to explain the process that you'll have to go through with the certification body to get the actual ISO certification, and I need to explain what you need to do to maintain your ISO certification after you get certified. So these are the 10 steps that you have to go through when implementing ISO 27001 within your organization. And the first thing that you have to do is to choose the implementation team, to choose the people who will be involved in the management system, okay? And these people will give their input, opinions, execute tasks, these are the people who will be actively working to get the management system of the company compliant to ISO 27001 requirements. These people, in the second step, will naturally need to get some type of training to understand what is required of them. And seeing this video is a very important first step for these people to understand, the overall concept of what we are talking about, so they can see the big picture before starting to go in the nitty-gritty. Having said that, the idea of training has to be continual. There will be different concepts that you will need to understand, and you can use the different types of channels that we have agreed together to contact me or to get to access the information that you need to understand how to meet each of these requirements when going through them. So even though training is the second point, you need to keep on getting some type of training or assistance as you go along to make sure that you truly understand how to answer a particular topic. The third thing that we have to do is to set the boundaries for certification. This is also known as the scope of certification. And in terms of clients for hybrid, this will be defined based on the information that you will give me in the gap analysis questions. Okay, so in the gap analysis questions, you will explain certain concepts of what the company does, and I will create the scope of certification for you. And once it's ready, it is important that you review that text, because that is the text that you will actually have written on your ISO 27001 certification when you come to that step. Okay, so that is something that we can discuss naturally later on during the implementation process. Now, the next three things are the Information Security Manual, Annex A, and creating the supporting system. And this gives me the opportunity to explain what ISO 27, what is required of you when we're talking about ISO 27001 documentation. So let's take them step by step and start with the Information Security Manual. In the Information Security Manual, we put information like what are your risks. Okay, so we're going to do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to identify the context of your organization. Based on that information, we will do a risk assessment, and we will also prioritize opportunities. We will define the objectives, the information security objectives. We will define what type of suppliers you have within your company in terms of information security. So there are these topics that are relatively static, and whereby we have to give certain information to explain certain concepts within the company, like the ones that I have just mentioned. The Information Security Manual will be created for you as soon as you upload the gap analysis questions, and it is important for you to go through the information that is available on the Information Security Manual screens, all the screens, okay? And you will need to check that the information added is relevant to your organization. And of course, I strongly suggest that you add and remove things to make it more relevant to your exacting needs. And perhaps here it would be wise for me to take a side step about this explanation and say that in ISO standards, there is the saying whereby you have to say what you do what you say. So if you're saying that for a particular topic you're doing 17 things, then in reality you'll have to do those 17 things. But if you say that you're going to do one thing, then you're going to be audited for that one thing. Okay? So it's important that when reviewing the information that I will create for you in the manual, in the supporting system, and also in Annex A controls, you don't go overboard in the modifications that you make, in the sense that you write what is the ideal case scenario. It would be ideal to define what is the realistic scenario of what can be achieved, and maybe set the targets a bit further than where you already are, to have that idea of continual improvement. But it's important to set systems in place that are reasonable. Okay. Of course, we will go through this process together, so I will be able to assist as we go along. So as regards the Information Security Manual, to close on that topic, basically I will be creating that information for you on MS Grog. You'll have the opportunity to review all the information, and add and remove elements accordingly as you deem fit for your organization. Maybe you'd have certain more types of suppliers than I would have mentioned. Okay, so you will make those changes that I'm pretty sure that once you get to it, you'll be able to make and adjust. The second element within the documentation, and it is the fifth step, is risk management as per Annex A. Annex A is, so the standard itself is split into two sections, you could say. There are 10 clauses within this standard, and then there is Annex A. The 10 clauses are being met through the Information Security Manual and the supporting system, and Clause A is another element within the standard which basically has a list of 93 controls split into 4 sections that your organization needs to follow, needs to determine whether such controls apply to your organization or not. Okay? Once again, based on the information that you will give me in the gap analysis questions, I should have most of the information that I need to create a sample Annex A control risk and mitigation actions that might be relevant to your organization. I will also exclude or mark as not applicable any controls that do not apply for your organization, and I will write the necessary justification. For example, for cabling security, the physical cables for your network, if you don't have an office, if you're a remote company, then I will mark the control of secure cabling as not applicable because, of course, you don't have an office. So once you submit the information in the gap analysis, I will be able to create Annex A also for you. And then after I've made my work, you can review the list of controls also within the section on MS-Prog of the Information Security Manual. Okay, there's a specific page for Annex A controls. You can go through these 9 controls, read the risks, read the mitigation actions, and confirm whether you do what is being written, or maybe you'd want to edit it in some way to explain what you're doing to meet that particular control. And if there's something that is not being done right now, okay, you can say that it's initial or non-existent in the list of items. If it's currently being implemented, you can say managed or optimized when looking at Annex A controls on MS-Prog. Now, if an action needs to be done to mitigate that, to action that particular mitigation, add a task on the relevant section for the control so that you'll be able to track what needs to be done in terms of your information security management system. Now, so far, we spoke about the Information Security Manual and Annex A controls. The supporting system is a set of templates that I will provide for you unless you already have and that you will give me during the gap analysis where you're uploading the documentation. So if so the topics that are being discussed in the supporting system include, for example, equipment, people, incident management, suppliers. So these are different topics that we have to consider in terms of the management system. So let's talk about, for example, suppliers. For suppliers, we'll need to have a list of suppliers and we'll need to have certain criteria for evaluation. For example, whether they have ISO 27001 or not. Of course, if we're working with an ISO 27001 certified company, then we'll need to have less controls on that particular company because there is someone external checking them. So if they don't have ISO 27001 certification, mind you, we can say that we're going to do a yearly evaluation of them, and that is why we would have the Excel sheet. So any Excel sheets that you might need, and there's going to be maybe 5, 6, 7 of them at most, will be provided to you in the supporting system. However, if you tell me, for example, let's take the topic of people. In terms of people, we'll need 3 things effectively. We'll need a training plan, a training record, and a job description. If you tell me that you have a particular Excel sheet, for example, or a particular system, or maybe an e-learning platform that you use to plan and to plan the training, and on this e-learning platform, for example, you have your training records, then that would be fine, and we wouldn't need to have the particular Excel sheet. But in the supporting system stage, ultimately, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to come up with a few Excel sheets that might not be available within your organization as systems to meet all the requirements of the standard. So to meet all the requirements of ISO 27001 in terms of documentation, we will need three things. We'll need the information security manual. We need to identify mitigation actions for NXA controls, and we need to create the supporting system. Once those three things are done, then we need to go for the system deployment stage. And in the system deployment, if there are any things that need to be done, then we're going to start doing them. Start is the key word because, as I said earlier, ISO 27001 is a system for continual improvement. Not once you are perfect in terms of information security, then you will proceed for the internal audit or for the external audit, because you'll never be perfect. Okay, there will always be things that you'll need to do, and ISO 27001 doesn't expect you to be perfect. If you're perfect, it means that your risk assessment wasn't strong enough, I would say, because there will always be risks that needs to be actioned, and it is our job through the certification to always mitigate these risks. And I'm emphasizing on this topic because unfortunately sometimes companies tend to overcomplicate things in the system deployment stage, whereby if you keep things simple and set a realistic action plan by when you intend to implement all the things that you'd like to implement, which can be 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, that's you showing that you have a plan for information security. So after we've identified the documentation that we need to meet the requirements of the standard, we will know what we still don't do. Okay, you will know what you still don't do, and then you can have an implementation plan for those things. You can add tasks on MS-DRUG itself to say this will be done by then, this will be done by that other date, etc. Once that is done, then we will do the internal audit. Myself or one of my associates will be doing an internal audit for your organization, okay, to make sure that you are fully compliant with the requirements of the standard. Keep in mind that every time we're going to edit the information at specific stages, we're going to review everything that we're doing. So we will make sure that you have everything that you need in the internal audit, okay? And you don't need to prepare anything for the internal audit. If you would have said that you're doing something in other parts of the documentation, just make sure that you're doing it. But if during the internal audit there are any findings, we don't find the things that we're looking for, then that is not a problem. Once again, the idea of an ISO 27001 certification, including the internal audit and the external audit, whereby these are considered as opportunities for us to learn on how we can improve our management system. Typically, the internal audit will be followed by a management review. Okay, so in the management review, there are certain screens, certain topics that you will need to discuss as you will see them on MS-DRUG, okay, and you need to discuss whether there were any changes. Possibly in the first year, there won't be many huge changes, okay, but from the second year of achieving certification, you might want to discuss certain elements within that are available on the management review meeting screens of MS-DRUG. You can discuss those topics to find ways in which you can improve and update your management system. And once the management review meeting has been done, then you can work with a certification body. So when it comes to ISO certification, a consultant like myself would be the person who is helping you to study for the exam. So then I cannot correct your exam. So just like in the financial industry, there are accountants and auditors. In the ISO industry, there are consultants and auditors. And A consultant cannot be an auditor, and an auditor cannot be a consultant. So to get certified, you need to work with what we call certification bodies. And it's very important that you choose to work with an accredited certification body who has the certification needed from the necessary authorities for them to issue accredited ISO certifications. And there are two steps that we have to go through. First, we have to go through the commercial process. And in the commercial process, therefore, we're going to find an accredited certification body. We're going to contact them to get a quote, okay? They're going to send the quote, we'll approve the quote, and effectively would have identified the certification body according to the scope of certification, okay? So we'll explain the scope of certification within the manual, and the certification body will have access to the scope of certification to understand what you do as a company, so they can issue the necessary quote. And then there is the technical process, where the technical process effectively is split into three main steps. First of all, there's the stage 1 audit, whereby the external auditor will review the documentation that would be all available on MSROG, and they would compare that documentation to the requirements of the standard to make sure that everything is compliant and as should be. In stage 2 audit, you will be working with the certification body. So rather than having us as internal auditors, this time you're going to have someone else, no big changes, and they will be asking you similar questions to what we would have asked. Okay, so if during the internal audit we feel that you are ready for the external audit, then you will definitely pass the external audit, because we understand the logic that certification bodies use whilst doing the external audit. So ultimately, in a stage 2 audit, what the auditor is doing is that they are comparing what you have written that you do on your documentation, okay, to what you're doing in reality. Okay, so effectively in stage 1, we are comparing the documentation that you've written to the requirements of the standard. In stage 2, we are comparing the documentation that you've written to what you're doing in reality. And after that is done, then the external auditor will pass the report to the certification body, who will in turn recommend you for certification, and then you will get the certificate typically within 1 week of the external audit. Now, contrary to what happens at university, you finish the course, you get the certificate, and it means that you know the topic. Even though there's so many changes happening in every field of study, that's how universities and academy works in general. You get the certificate signifying that you know a particular topic. ISO certification works in a different way. In my opinion, when you get certified, it only means that you have started the journey for continual improvement. Okay, so, and that concept is inbuilt within ISO requirements, because every year a company must do an internal audit, have management reviews, and host the certification body for an external audit. Okay, so every year you will have an internal audit and an external audit. External audits can also be called surveillance audits. Okay, so that is what effectively you need to do to maintain your ISO certification. What are the benefits of an ISO certification? First of all, there is the idea, of course, that once you get ISO certified, your brand is going to improve. You're going to have a better reputation on the market. You're more likely to acquire prestigious customers and suppliers, and you'd have a unique selling point possibly in your industry, whereby you are protecting going out of your way to protect the information security of your clients and all stakeholders involved within your organization. Unless, of course, it is an industry standard whereby everyone has to do it within your industry. And in my personal experience, I am more intrigued by the business performance benefits that an ISO 27001 certification gives, because that is why there are the brand benefits in the first place, right? Because they know that an ISO 27001 certified company will have certain systems in place to make sure that it is protecting their information. And that is what we have over here. So first of all, we're going to ensure that we have better systems to ensure legal compliance when it comes to all relevant information security regulations. We're going to have a system based on continual improvement that allows us to take decisions based on data rather than on opinions. Okay, and finally, we're going to have happier interested parties, including suppliers, customers, clients, employees, shareholders, the government. All stakeholders will be happier knowing that confidential information is being adequately protected. So those are the benefits of an ISO 27001 certification. And now I wanted to touch base just a little bit on the idea of a high-level structure. So if you are implementing ISO 27001, for example, and ISO 9001, there is this idea of having the high-level structure, which basically means that both standards have 10 clauses. And if, for example, clause 5.2 of ISO 9001 is quality policy, for ISO 27001, it will be information security policy. Okay, and the standards mirror each other as much as possible, therefore making it easier for you to meet the requirements of the standard without having to make any changes as possible. So whether you are ISO 9001 certified or have other certifications, it's important that we start this process by reviewing existing systems. So I'd like to really understand what type of documentation you have. If you have any procedures, flowcharts, systems, Excel sheets, policies, contracts, employment contracts, job description templates that you use, NDAs, any type of documentation that you might have available, please share it with me in the gap analysis section. Okay, so I would be able to take what you already have, understand what you're doing as a company, and try to use as much documentation as you have right now already without having to create different documents that would serve the same purpose like documents that you already have. I believe that we are on a very exciting journey together. I've been on this journey with so many clients. I've implemented over 170 implementations over the past 14 years. And it's been an honor for me serving so many clients, and I'm pretty sure that it would be an honor for me to work with you as well. Thank you so much for your help and understanding, and for listening to this whole video. And I look forward to working with you and to helping you achieve this certification. Thank you so much.